Welcome back to Resurrection Radio, the show about life. Resurrection Radio is real stories of signs, wonders, and miracles, and people coming back to life. And now, the hosts of the show, here's Renee and Dino.
Renee, we got actually two special guests here at one time today.
Well, y'all, you need to fasten your seatbelts and look forward to a wonderful story and a trip to heaven with Cheryl and Valerie. Good morning, Cheryl and Valerie. How are y'all today?
Good morning.
Good
We're
morning.
doing great.
Awesome. Well, why don't we start with Valerie? And Valerie, just tell us what happened. Tell us.
I always have Cheryl talking because I don't remember a lot of things, but I was hit by 3 semi-trucks up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I was going in and out of consciousness, and once I crossed over, that was it. I died. I think once I crossed over, it took me about 2 hours to actually cross over to the other side. But when I did, I remember being able to breathe because everything, my insides had been crushed. But when I stood up, once you pass over, there was no more pain. There was no more suffering. And but I turned around and I saw Jesus. And I knew him immediately. And so I ran right up to him. And I began touching his face. And I you know, when you're in heaven, the atmosphere is very different. It's it's very loud in heaven. And the scripture that talks about that God's voice is like the sound of many waters.
Yeah.
And so I was surrounded by his voice and his sound. And the things that I noticed, I mean, because all this is happening, it felt like I was there forever, looking and experiencing and seeing what I was seeing. But yet not long at all. So when I looked at Jesus, and he is the revelation Jesus, the fire in his eyes, his hair is like fire, he glows, he's very, what's the word I'm looking for? He's very personal.
Yeah.
There's an intimacy, yet there is, I knew that I belonged to him.
And Cheryl, tell us your part. Tell us how you're involved with Valerie's story.
Well, her accident was in March of 2000, and in January of 2000, dream. And in my dream, I was driving in my car, and I came up on a crash that had to do with semi-trucks. And so when I woke up out of that dream, such a burden on me that I began to really pray. And, I prayed protection over family, friends, from anything like this happening. And it was with me pretty much all the time for about 2 weeks, and then it would lift and it would come back, and I would just continue praying. And so, So then when the accident happened, I didn't remember the dream right away until like one day sitting in the hospital in the waiting area, just meditating on things and praying and asking God. And then he took me back to that dream.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got the phone call that she was in the accident, I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, you want me to pray? Are you taking her home, or is she to live? So when I received the phone call that Valerie was in the car accident, I immediately asked the Lord me to pray. Are you taking her home, or is she going to live? And he said, pray that she will live and not die and declare the works of the Lord. So that was like my scripture to hang on to and to declare. And I know why now, because when I saw her for the first time, after the accident, after her surgery, I didn't even recognize her.
Oh.
I didn't even, I walked in, her head was swollen. I turned around, I walked back out of the room and asked her nurse, where is Valerie Pater's room? And she said, in the room you just are stunned, like what? So I had to turn around, go back and look, and I had to really study her to recognize her. My part was praying and standing on the word, and people would come in, pastors would come in, and they'd say, what's God saying, and how are we supposed to pray? And so I was like, I would declare that word, and so it was like, okay, we'll agree with you.
Yeah. And Cheryl, you told me in a pre-interview that basically they were keeping Valerie on life support to harvest her organs. And so she was pretty much dead. Like they were getting ready to take her off. And tell us just a little bit about that.
Well, she was ventilator dependent. That's what it says in her records. And she was completely brain dead. There was no activity in her brain because she had 2 strokes and she was bleeding from her brain. All her internal major organs, her diaphragm was just ripped apart and then went up into her chest cavity.
Yeah.
She had ruptured liver. They just said, pretty much prepare.
Yeah.
We didn't know that that's why they were keeping her on life support. It was a nurse that was a friend of ours that heard it behind the scenes talking to Valerie's ICU nurse, her head nurse. And so she told us later on that they had all the paperwork ready to approach her husband to sign the paperwork. The nurse came in and said, you're going to have to leave the room because there's a shift change. And so when they said that, I heard in the spirit, God said, I am shifting everything right now.
Huh.
Wow.
And that morning, after that was all done, the doctor, the nurse came in, checked her vitals because they were getting ready to change shifts, and he said, I'm going to go get her head nurse. Something's happening. And so he went and got her head nurse. She came in. She checked her eyes and her vitals, and she said, something's happening. I'm going to go get the doctor. And they wouldn't tell me because they would come in and they scurried out of the room. Then the doctor came in, and he checked her, and he looked at me, and he said, I think your sister's coming back. There's some activity. And so that was the first time, and it was from, she had the accident on a Monday, and that was on a Friday morning.
Wow.
I think we're both a little speechless over here. I'm like tearing up and like,
Yes, a lot of people tear up when we share this story because, Valerie and I prayed even before the accident with other prayer warriors in our prayer group that there would be,
he was talking to me probably a couple years before about a revelation, which we all prayed for a revelation of the cross to know what Jesus really did for us, and praying for the church, the bride of Christ. And so as I went through and still going through this process, I know how to pray for his bride because that's who we are, but it was so personal for me. So when they brought me out of my coma, I heard the Lord say, this is my beloved bride. And I went, oh God, she's a mess. She can't see, she can't think, she can't. But when we do, prophetic things, because I myself was in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I couldn't function, and I started out like a baby.
Yeah.
And I had to relearn everything, but I learned quickly. And my whole life has been, I think, set aside for preparation for revelation of the bride, and not realizing it now until after the accident, spending that time with Jesus, who is the greatest lover there is. he is so full of love, and there's so many things about him. He's a lion, he is a lamb, he is fierce, he is gentle. There was such a sweetness over him, and yet he was passionate for me.
Yeah.
And if he's passionate for me, he's passionate for his people and his creation. And that was the message that he came back to say, tell them who I am. And because we have not represented Jesus, the church hasn't represented Jesus in the way that who he really is.
Just don't get me started on that. And I'm not.
But he loves the church. Yeah. He loves the church.
And I'm not kidding, Valerie. Before we started this interview, I was hearing "Here Comes the Bride" in my head. But here comes the bride in my head, and I almost started singing it.
Valerie and Cheryl, I got a quick question for both of you. That both of you kind of referenced seeing Jesus, and for some of the folks listening right now to the show, maybe you can just describe, because I think when somebody says we saw Jesus or I saw Jesus, everybody's, I guess, vision of that might be different. But what did you see?
I saw, what I saw, who I was with, was Revelation Jesus. The fire in his eyes, the flaming ball of light.
Right.
And it was so bright. I mean, I have blind spots, and I still looked in his face, directly in his eyes. And he is, the passion in his eyes, the physical appearance. His eyes were I can't describe the blue. It's a deep sea, maybe turquoise, but a deep blue. He had kind of lightish brown hair, and he glowed. He just glowed.
That's cool.
The glory of God. And you step into this light, and it's hard to explain what you see, because I came from, I don't know, it's just really hard, but everything was bright, white, and he was just, he really is that fierce, very passionate lover. How can I, there's not, when I spoke with him, we didn't speak, we spoke in thought. And so we had, realized the word says, he knows our thoughts. And I realized, well, it's so loud here, no wonder we spoke in thought.
Yeah.
But the sound was so comforting. And it is, the voice of God is like the sound of many waters. And so, but it was very comforting. And heaven is the wildest place I'd ever, it was crazy good. And it was crazy, it was fun.
Yeah.
And people are walking. There's worship. I went into the throne room, and when the angels when they are worshiping, they are so, they fly into his presence, and they come out, the seraphim come out just screaming, but they are lit on fire because they flew right in. And they come in because they are getting, you think when you get to heaven that you'll know things, but we're going to forever be discovering God himself. And so when they would fly into that revelation of God, they would come out in like pure euphoria, screaming with joy, laughter. They were celebrating. Yeah. And I thought, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And so you step right in with them. And there were people everywhere. There was music. I became a musical instrument that Jesus played through me. And only I can make that sound that brings forth, an orchestra in heaven. And it was just wild. The scriptures talk about joy unspeakable and full of glory. And you look
Yeah.
at that and you read that, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
And I always kind of say it's like, I can kind of just, it's like Jesus would say, well, the kingdom of heaven is light. And so I said, well, heaven is light, but you can't quite capture it. But it's like going to Disneyland, you know, you feel the anticipation and the music before you even get into the gate. You know, you hear some of the Disney songs or whatever, and then
Yes.
when you get past the gates, you know, you can go into Fantasyland or Adventureland. Well, I went into the gates of Restoration.
Wow.
And the Lord was doing things within me to just adjust and fine tune and restore things that even maybe my wrong thinking or things that had hurt me or things I had misperceived. He was just kind of touching areas of my heart, and suddenly I was being healed or water cleansed.
I'll add to that. We were talking about, you know, what did Jesus look like? At one point in my prayer time, praying for her, I went into a vision, and I went into heaven, and I actually saw her. She just said being washed, you know. She was in the river with Jesus, playing
Yeah.
with him.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
and she was being, I believe at that point, restored because she didn't have a childhood and didn't get to play very much because of all her surgeries. And so that was part of her restoration, and the Jesus I was seeing was so playful, and he was restoring her childhood back to her.
Yeah, that's good.
All the things she had lost. And then on the other side, like when I saw Jesus, he, you know, just seeing her, Jesus as I'm watching Valerie, and because I had been praying, we had been praying in the prayer group, God, give the church a revelation of who you are and your love for us. I actually saw Jesus in that place when I was washing her. Valerie was no longer there. It was Jesus. And he gave me that revelation of this is how much. And I can cry because it was such a awesome experience that if his people would see him and what he did for them, really what he did for them, and know that, you know, he went to the cross so that we could be free and we can have a life abundantly. That we don't stay on this side of the cross, you know, with you know, just stay there. We cross through it. We go through him, through Jesus. He's the door into everything we need. So when we get on the other side, it's abundant life. So I was seeing twofold. I was seeing him on this side of the cross and exactly what he did, which gave me the revelation of his love. I was experiencing his love here, as Valerie's experienced his love in heaven. And it was like heaven and earth collided. And I remember after she started coming to and we had to leave the room so they could do their shift change, I went into the ICU room, and I fell on my face, and I began to laugh and come up weeping. And I was going, well, this is crazy. And I saw the Lord, and he said, this is the day that I have longed for my bride to know and have a revelation of who I am and my love for them.
Yeah, it's good.
So that was my experience of seeing Jesus in a whole different way that I had prior.
Well, Cheryl and Valerie, we are so grateful for y'all's story. I mean, I could listen to y'all for a few hours, to be honest. But I know that since then, y'all travel now, and you have speaking engagements that y'all do. And your website is heavenisabreathaway.com, where people can find your book, and they can find videos and your itinerary for your speaking engagements. Also, I know that we didn't talk about this, but I do want to tell the listeners out there that Valerie and Cheryl were a part of a show called Project Afterlife that Destination American aired. And so their story is on that TV show also. So y'all need to check it out to hear even more about their story. This has been really awesome. We really appreciate it. Yeah.
I mean, what an amazing event in their life, and I'm so glad they were able to share that with us today here in Resurrection Radio. Did you have something to kind of close with today?
Yeah, I just I can't get the scripture Galatians 2:20 out of my mind. When Cheryl was giving Valerie a bath, and she didn't see Valerie anymore, she saw Jesus crucified. And Galatians 2:20 says that I am crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And in this body, I live by faith in the Son of God who died for me. And that's so encouraging because no matter what we go through physically, emotionally, spiritually, we know that Christ in us can carry us through that. And we can overcome with him.
You've been listening to Resurrection Radio, real stories of signs, wonders, and miracles, and people coming back to life. Join Renee and Dino again for the next episode of Resurrection Radio, or log on to www.renee4321media.com to listen to more programming. That's www.renee4321media.com. Thanks again for listening.